Hello there and welcome. This is Mikhail or Michael speaking, and as always, before the video starts, I want to use this opportunity to express my eternal gratitude towards those who decided to support me financially, be it through Patreon, PayPal, or Super Thanks. I really appreciate your generosity, so thank you friends, and have a blessed day. Now, today's video I will start with the city of Bakhmut, or as it is also called Artyomovsk. Currently, as far as I know, Russians have not officially renamed the city, so it would be Bakhmut for now. Where, like yesterday, Russian offensive continued into this day. First, let's discuss the situation on the southern flank of Bakhmut, where Russians yet again advanced here in this dacha area, and as a result of successful offensive operations in the last 24 hours, captured this much territory from the Ukrainian side. This, like I said yesterday, is a part of a bigger operation to capture the whole dacha area, after which Russians will advance in the direction of Ivanivsky. In a way, this recent territorial gain is also acknowledged by pro-Ukrainian sources. For example, here on this pro-Ukrainian map, you can see the situation of yesterday, and here you can see the situation of today. Also, while we're here, let's quickly discuss the situation in Klishevka, where this map also updated and showed some Russian progress to the north of the village. Russians were constantly counterattacking here and generally being very active, using a combination of artillery, aviation, and drone strikes. For example, here on this video you can see a combination of 3 such strikes in which Russian forces were able to hit 2 Ukrainian tanks and 1 self-propelled artillery piece. Overall, the intensity of Russian attacks and the amount of losses sustained by Ukrainian side here are rising, and so far, Ukrainians are unable to stabilize this portion of the front. Let's go to the northern flank and quickly discuss the situation here as well. Although there are no territorial changes to report, it is important to note that Russians continued their general offensive from the city of Bakhmut in the direction of Ivanivsky, as well as attacked from the settlements of Khramova in the direction of 00506 road, and did so from the settlement of Yagodne and Berhivka. Russian forces also continued fighting within Bogdanivka settlement, where their attacks were met with Ukrainian counterattack. At this point in time, the battle is ongoing without any clear results. Russians also advancing to the flank of Bogdanivka here, as well as in the direction of Grigorivka from the settlement of Dubova-Vasilivka. On the entire front, Ukrainians engaged Russians in counterattacks, as they did everything in their power to stop Russians and not allow them to advance. At the time of recording, there are no confirmed territorial gains on the northern flank. However, the situation is somewhat similar to the southern one. Despite all Ukrainian attempts, they are still unable to regain cohesion and are mostly on the back foot. Now, before we move to the other portions of the front, I would kindly ask you to consider supporting this video with your like, comments, and of course, if you haven't subscribed, a subscription. Words cannot describe how important these actions are, not only for this channel but for me, so if you would do that for me, I would be very thankful. Then let's quickly visit the Solidar direction, where Russians were on the offensive also. Here, their attacks came in the general direction of Ukrainian-controlled villages of Razdalivka, as well as Vesely. Not only are Russians attacking in the direction of Vesely directly, they do so on its flank, perhaps in attempt to encircle it completely. They also advanced along this rail line, near the settlement of Belogorivka. In fact, this is exactly where the new territorial change in favor of the Russians appeared. So in the last 24 hours, this is exactly how much territories Russian forces were able to capture. Now, as you can see, it isn't as big, but Russians are continuously expand their zone of control on this flank and continue to greatly endanger the settlement of Vesely, and if this kind of progress continues, I'm sure Ukrainians will be forced to retreat to a much suitable and better defensive positions. From here, let's quickly visit the Kupiansk front line. Not much territorial changes had been appearing here ever since Ukrainians were able to reinforce this front, and currently the hardest fighting is happening near the Ukrainian-controlled village of Sinikivka and Russian-controlled settlement of Liman Pershi. Here, Ukrainians are being most active, constantly counterattacking Russians within the forest to the northwest of Sinikivka, as Russians did the same in attempt to not give Ukrainians any upper hand on this portion of the front. As a result of constant back and forth, Russians were able to yet again advance here ever slightly and recapture some of the previously lost positions. Here on this picture, you can see exactly how much territories that was. Generally speaking about this front, the fighting here is mostly of positional style, and it is mostly dictated by the weather. This portion of the front sees very heavy rains, and the ground here is turned into mush. From Kupiansk, let's go all the way to the settlement or town of Avdiivka, where Russian offensive continues. As well, let's discuss the territorial change that appeared in the last 24 hours, and it happened here in the industrial zone near to Avdiivka town. As a result of successful offensive operations, Russians were able to advance about this far, and it somewhat goes in line with the report I made yesterday, in which I said that Russians entered the settlement of Avdiivka from this side and initiated the battle within its first streets. On the interesting note, as Russians attack in the direction of Avdiivka itself and are now tangled in fighting within it, Ukrainians are not sitting idly and constantly counterattack Russians in attempt to stop their progress. Currently, there is a hard battle ongoing in this general area. From the town of Avdiivka, let's move to the town of Marinka and discuss the situation here also. About a few days ago, I reported of a full capture of this town. However, it is time to acknowledge that perhaps those claims were somewhat premature. Although Russians did establish control over the most of the town, the clearing operation took some time. Although currently Russians are holding most of the city, the northern part here is still in Ukrainian hands. There is a video taken on the very outskirts of Marinka that is located here, and you can see it on the video, in which Russian troops are putting on what would seem to be a Soviet and a Russian flag. As you can see, they do it pretty freely and in the open. It would mean that Ukrainian forces are pushed back significantly, and Russians can now safely operate within Marinka streets. Russian attacks did not stop here, as they advanced here across the open fields in the general direction of currently Ukrainian-controlled village of Pobeda, as well as towards the bigger settlement of Navamka, in support of Russian attacks that are currently taking place near that town. Now, those recent Russian territorial gains were also acknowledged by this pro-Ukrainian map. For example, within Marinka, you can see the situation of yesterday and now the situation of today. You can also see that they acknowledge Russian advances along this road in the direction of Pobeda itself. And of course, they also acknowledged Russian territorial changes in the direction of Novomikhailivka. This is how much territories they gave Russians on this day. And here on this picture, you can see Syriac maps take on this recent Russian attack. From here, let's move to the Zaporozhian front, and to be more specific, Rabotina-Verbova directions. In the last 24 hours, Russians were engaged in counterattacks near Rabotina. They attacked from the west, from the south, as well as from the east, while Ukrainians attacked in the direction of Russian-controlled village of Verbova. Ukrainian attacks in the direction of Verbova were stopped by the Russians and did not result in any territorial changes. However, Russian attacks in the direction of Rabotina were more successful. This recent territorial change in favor of Russians was also acknowledged by a pro-Ukrainian source. Here was the situation of yesterday, and here is the situation of today. As you can see by presented arrows, village of Rabotina is now a primary target of Russian attacks here on this portion of the front. From here, let's at last visit Zaporozhye and discuss the situation within Krynki settlement. As I speak, Russians are currently counterattacking in its direction in attempt to throw Ukrainians out of the city and back behind Konka River, or even Dnipro River as well, and relative success is reported by Russians. On the interesting note, the situation for the Ukrainian soldiers here is becoming more and more desperate, as constant Russian counterattacks and bombardments that follow after are putting a strain on the Ukrainian soldiers. The rotation system put in place by the Ukrainians in order to safely evacuate wounded and bring in more troops isn't working exactly as intended, because Russians are constantly on the watch, and even though Ukrainians are mostly going through rotations at night, it doesn't help them, as you can see here on this video. Now obviously I cannot show this video on YouTube, and you can find it on my Telegram channel, or you can watch my video uncensored on my Patreon. All the necessary links would be in the video description below. Now on the video you can see Ukrainian boats coming under attack by Russian drones. Generally speaking, this is the reality of the situation. A lot of Ukrainian boats are destroyed before they are able to reach the shore, and even if they do, they are still not safe. And there are even rumors that due to all the difficulties and complications, Ukrainian forces will soon retreat from this town and give up on this bridgehead altogether. With this, I end today's video. Hopefully it was to your liking and was informative enough. As always, humanity calls me to condemn all violence against human beings. Have a good day and always remember, Russia will be free and great.